Welcome back to Mzansi Screen Time, where we unpack the stories that have everyone in South Africa talking. The kind of stories that make people stop scrolling on social media, turn up the volume, and ask the question, what is really going on behind the scenes? Today's story is one that has been causing whispers in political circles, debates in taxis, discussions in offices, and heated arguments online. It's a story about power, money, influence, and a man whose name keeps appearing in some of the most controversial headlines in the country. We are talking about. Now, if you have been following the news lately, you have probably seen this name trending again and again. Some people describe him as a businessman, others call him a tenderpreneur, and some critics go even further, suggesting that his story may expose something much bigger happening behind the scenes in South Africa. But before we dive into the drama and the allegations, let's slow down for a moment and ask a simple question. Who really is Cat Matlala? For years operated largely in the world of business. Like many entrepreneurs, he was involved in companies that aimed to secure large government contracts. In South Africa, government tenders can be extremely valuable. Winning just one major contract can turn a business into a multi-million rand operation almost overnight. And this is where the story begins to get interesting. One of the deals that eventually brought Matlala into the spotlight was linked to the commonly known as SAPS. According to reports, a company associated with him secured a contract meant to provide health services to police officers across the country. Now imagine the scale of something like that. The is one of the largest institutions in the country. Thousands of officers, multiple provinces, huge operational needs. So a contract involving services for SAPS could easily run into hundreds of millions of rand. At first, everything looked like business as usual. Contracts are awarded every year, and companies compete to win them. But before long, people started asking questions. How exactly was this tender awarded? Was the process fair? Were all the proper procedures followed? Or was there something happening behind closed doors that the public did not know about? Those questions slowly started gaining attention. Journalists began investigating. Political commentators began discussing the issue. And suddenly the contract that once looked like a routine government deal became the center of a growing controversy. Eventually, the contract was canceled. But instead of ending the story, the cancellation made things even more dramatic. Because once authorities started examining the details, they began looking much deeper into the people involved. And that's when the name Cat Matlala really started making headlines. Suddenly, the businessman who had previously operated mostly in the background was now being discussed across the country. Television debates, radio talk shows, online news platforms, everywhere you looked, people were asking the same question. What exactly is going on with Cat Matlala? But the story did not stop with tenders and contracts. Not even close. Because as investigators looked deeper into the situation, they discovered something that made the story even more shocking. There were also serious criminal allegations connected to him. Now, when a businessman becomes involved in a tender scandal, it already raises eyebrows. But when that same person is also facing allegations involving violent crime and conspiracy, the story becomes something entirely different. Suddenly, the case was no longer just about business. Now it was about crime, about the justice system, about whether powerful individuals might be operating in ways the public does not fully understand. When the case finally reached court, the atmosphere was tense. Cameras were waiting outside. Journalists were watching every detail, and members of the public wanted to know exactly what the prosecutors were going to reveal. Every court appearance seemed to bring more drama. There were legal arguments. There were delays. There were moments where the case appeared to move forward, and moments where it seemed to stall again. But while the courtroom drama was unfolding, another layer of controversy started surfacing, and this one pulled the story directly into the heart of national politics. Because suddenly, allegations started circulating about possible connections between Cat Matlala and individuals linked to powerful political figures. One name that started appearing in these discussions was, not directly, but through claims involving one of his relatives. Specifically, some reports and political commentary began mentioning who is widely known as the nephew of President Ramaphosa, and also a businessman in his own right. Now, it's very important to be clear here. These discussions involved allegations and claims being debated publicly, not proven facts. But the moment those names began appearing in the same conversation, the story instantly became even bigger, because whenever a scandal even indirectly touches someone connected to the country's president, the political temperature rises dramatically. Some commentators and political critics began suggesting that there may have been business interactions or communication between Cat Matlala and individuals connected to the Ramaphosa family. Others questioned whether those claims were exaggerated or politically motivated. Supporters of the president argued that simply mentioning a family member does not mean wrongdoing took place, and they insisted that any allegations should be tested properly through legal processes before conclusions are drawn. But in the world of political gossip and speculation, once a connection like that is mentioned, it spreads fast. Very fast. Soon social media platforms were filled with debates. People began asking questions. Was there really any relationship between these individuals? Were business networks overlapping in ways that had not previously been discussed? Or was the entire narrative being pushed by political rivals looking to create controversy? No matter which side of the debate people were on, the story had just become even more explosive. Because now it was not just about a businessman and a police contract. Now the conversation was touching the edges of the country's highest political office. And that is the kind of situation that immediately captures the nation's attention. At the same time, another controversial aspect of the story involved alleged links between Cat Matlala and individuals connected to the dot. Reports suggested that some people inside law enforcement may have communicated with him or interacted with businesses associated with him. Again, these claims have been widely debated and remain subject to investigation and legal scrutiny. But the possibility of those connections raised serious concerns, because if business figures have close relationships with individuals inside policing structures, people naturally start asking whether influence or favoritism could be involved. For a country that has spent years confronting corruption scandals, those are sensitive questions, and they are questions that the public wants answered. As the investigation and court proceedings continue, analysts say the story could still reveal new twists. Witnesses may testify, documents may surface, and details that are currently unknown could eventually become public. Some observers believe the scandal may eventually fade away if the evidence does not support the more dramatic claims. Others believe the opposite. They think the deeper investigators dig, the more connections could emerge. For now, South Africans are watching carefully, because scandals involving business, politics, and law enforcement rarely stay simple. They evolve, they grow, and sometimes they reveal stories far bigger than anyone imagined at the beginning. And that is exactly why the name Mzansi Cat Matlala continues to dominate headlines, conversations, and speculation across the country. Because until every question is answered, the mystery surrounding this story will continue to fuel debate, curiosity, and endless discussion across Mzansi.